and we're going to turn the tables over to Scott Ellia and just he's the college football expert. He is the host of College Shame Day, so we're going to get your full thoughts on everything that happened, what these, these 4 seeds here for the playoffs, anybody that didn't make it, what this ultimately meant to you and FSU and the herd of this. Because I know I told Emily as soon as they announced it, right then and there, I was like, I heard something smash all the way down in Richmond. Like I could feel it. I could feel it was like a disturbance in the force. So just talk me through your headspace today.
Well, first and foremost, I want to start this whole rant by saying congratulations to the Florida State Seminoles on a night that is now tainted for winning their first ACC championship since 2014, and on the back of true freshman quarterback Brock Glenn. There is nobody in this world that felt like he was going to go out there and just light it up. The only thing he needed to do was be John Stockton, not be Steph Curry, just facilitate the ball around, get it to your playmakers, and do what you had to do. Now, did he throw 8 for 21 for 55 yards? Yes. And that's to be expected. Nobody figured that their passing game was going to just beat the brakes off of Louisville. But in regards to Louisville, this is a team that averaged over 30 points a game for the season. And they averaged about 240 yards passing and 175 yards rushing, respectively. If you look at that game alone, the Florida State Seminole defense, which is a top 5 defense, was able to hold Jack Plummer, the quarterback for Louisville, to 111 yards passing, no touchdowns, and a pivotal interception by Tatum Bethune in the end zone, which was just a great play to watch that really helped seal the deal for the Florida State Seminoles. But also, they're rushing. They only rushed for 77 total yards for the game. So that alone should tell you. And also Louisville's a top 15 team. So my question would be, also, Brock Glenn wouldn't have been the quarterback for the bowl game anyways, regardless. Because backup quarterback Tate Rodemaker, he's in concussion protocol. He would have been perfectly fine to go for the bowl game. He wouldn't have been seen in the field pending any kind of another injury. So that's one thing. 2, my question is, how can the Florida State Seminoles move up a spot by beating the Florida Gators on the road in Gainesville with a backup quarterback and move up, but you go and you beat a top 15 team in one of the biggest stages for a quarterback to be on, which is a conference championship game, and be able to completely squander their offense and still drop down in the polls? That's one thing that I don't understand. Because if you actually look at the polls in the AP and the coaches poll, Florida State is number 3 in the coaches poll and number 4 in the AP. But for the college football playoff rankings, they're 5. How does that make any sense? Make it make sense to me, please. There's so much to unpack here, Reid. I'd like to say, let me start by saying, because I've already been going at this for a while, this is a complete sham and embarrassing, and the College Football Playoff Committee, in my opinion, has completely lost all relevancy and integrity and any kind of faith, because the reason why the College Football Playoff Committee was even made in the first place is because we used to go off the BCS, which was more determined by computers, and people were bitching and moaning that, the math never added up. So let's put the human element back into there. But now we're seeing what the human element's going to give you now. It's a clear error. And it's not just a Florida State Seminole fan base that feels this way. You're seeing it across the country in different fan bases and different national pundits. Some of those national pundits can shove it. Kirk Herbstreit and your fucking dog. Go somewhere. I don't care. Paul Feinbaum, you 4-eyed, Dumbo-eared motherfucker. No one cares about your opinion. We know who's signing your checks is the SEC. We know exactly why you have to go for Alabama, because if you go anything against Alabama, then your livelihood's off. Is just completely taken from underneath of you, and you're in some soup kitchen somewhere trying to find your next meal. I get that too. Oh, and also the College Football Playoff Committee. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Chris Alt, retired former head coach and athletic director for Nevada. What the fuck has Nevada done? Nothing. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Mitch Barnhart, the current athletic director for Kentucky. Why do we have current ADs even in here making decisions? He's an SEC team. You don't think he wants an SEC team to go in there to further kind of prop up that whole conference?
That is a curious thing to me. I didn't know that there were any current ADs in the
and he's not the only one. Then we get to Boo Kerrigan. Boo Kerrigan, the current AD for NC State. Go fuck yourself.
Oh, boo.
You came on to ESPN and you were asked a very simple question. Why did the College Football Playoff Committee pick Alabama over Florida State? And you want to know what his answer was, Reid? It was a non-answer. It was a perfect, quintessential political answer where you beat around the bush and just said a lot of words. It's when you're trying to write that paper, you're scrambling last minute, trying to get your word count up, and you just said as many words as possible. And those aren't even the only two current athletic directors. We got Chet Gladchuk, the current AD for the U.S. Naval Academy. Jim Grobe, a retired former head coach for Baylor, Wake Forest, and Ohio University. Mark Harlan, current AD of Utah. Gord Manuel, current AD of Michigan. How is he even in there getting a vote and a say in this? You have a team that's obviously, I don't want to take anything away from Michigan or from Washington or even Texas at this point. They deserve to be there. But why does he get a say? David Salier, current AD of Miami University. No, not Convict U or Coral Gables University. We're talking about Miami University, the home of Big Ben himself in Ohio. He's on the board.
Go to hell.
Will Shields, college football, NFL great. He's in the Hall of Fame for both. What's he currently doing right now? Oh, he's operating a sports facility in Kansas, but he gets a vote on who goes to the college football playoff. Gene Taylor, current AD of Kansas State. The hell? Another AD. Joe Taylor, former head coach for FAMU, Hampton, Virginia Union, Howard, and now the current VP of Intercollegiate Athletics at Virginia Union. Rod West, the group president, utility operations for Entergy Corporation, and former president of the Sugar Bowl. So now you have some hotshot guy who's a group president for a utility company in here. Oh, and then Kelly Whiteside, whatever the fuck your name is. She's a professor in the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. What the fuck are her credentials to be able to make these decisions?
Go to hell.
All of you go to hell. This doesn't make any sense from the top down at all. And then you want to get into the whole Florida State is without starting quarterback Jordan Travis, and that's our whole justification. If Jordan Travis is such a pivotal piece to the decision process for a team not to make it into even for a shot to vie for a national championship, give him the Heisman now. Give him all the awards. Because if he is that important, then obviously he's clearly the most valuable player across the country, and he means the most to his team. Give him that. But we didn't see this happening when, the 2014 Ohio State Buckeyes, they were without their starting quarterback for their push. Oh, yeah. 2017 Alabama, same thing. 2018 Clemson Tigers, same thing. 2021 Georgia, same thing. They had the same issues. They didn't have their starting quarterback that started the season do this. But of course, time and time again, we see the goalposts get moved for these SEC teams, specifically Alabama, because God forbid the college football playoff doesn't have Alabama in there. And you can make the argument that they put the best teams in there, which in my opinion, if that's the argument you want to use, you're wrong. Because if you want to put the four best teams in college football in that playoff, where the fuck is Georgia? In the Orange Bowl with Florida State. Okay, well then you want to use the argument, we'll go put the teams that most deserve it. You're wrong there too. Because where's Florida State? Playing in the Orange Bowl. This is clearly the most biased decision that I've ever seen. And I'm trying to come from this from a very calm demeanor, which I'm sure at this point you would disagree with me being calm, but I'm trying to be as subjective as I can. And I know that I'm not wrong, and I feel confident in my decision of having this kind of reaction because, like I said, you're seeing this across the country, across all fan bases, and across all media. I mean, you had RG3 going toe-to-toe with Paul Feinbaum, and they're on complete ends of the spectrum. Reid knows I'm not the biggest fan of RG3. I don't think I ever really was, even when he was at Baylor. But I'll respect his decisions and his viewpoints to a certain degree. And he's even on board with this. Oh, and also, you want to say that because Jordan Travis was so pivotal, and that's what the whole injuries are such a big thing. They didn't care that Alabama needed a miracle to avoid a 6-6 Auburn 2 weeks ago. They had to squeak that one out there. And then they squeaked out this game against Georgia, who had a banged up Brock Bowers. So the decision doesn't make any sense. But the College Football Playoff Committee is always going to go for the most compelling TV matchup, and that means Alabama has to get in there.
And you brought that up about the miracle that they had to have against Auburn, and I thought that was the argument killing point that Booger McFarland made. Of all people, of all people to come out there and just get really fired up during that selection show, Booger McFarland brought that up in there saying, hey, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now if it hadn't been for a miraculous 4th and 31 kind of play by Alabama. It's one that will live on forever, especially now because they actually made the playoff. But you wouldn't be having this conversation if that hadn't happened.
Absolutely. And then even in the championship game, you can chalk that up to having a muffed handoff in the red zone for Georgia, marching on the goal line. But you got to look, and then you always get the argument, especially from SEC fan bases, especially Alabama and Georgia and the Florida Gators, that they will constantly say the ACC is of a lower class than the SEC. Last time I checked, they were still a Power 5 conference. Oh, and a Power 5 conference at 6-4 against the SEC right now. 2 of those wins being Florida State against LSU at the beginning of the season, and then Florida State again over Florida. Oh, and to remind you, with a backup quarterback in Gainesville. So how are you going to say that SEC is head and shoulders way above the ACC at this point? It doesn't make sense to me at all. And then they didn't care that Alabama beat the 2023 Georgia, not 2021 or 2022 Georgia. They cared that Alabama and the SEC had to have a spot in the playoff by birthright. They're SEC champion. They got to be in there. This decision should have never been between Alabama and Florida State. It should have been Michigan, Washington, Florida State, 1, 2, 3, gone. The 4th spot should have been between Texas and Alabama. That's where the decision should have been. This is the first time in the history of the college football playoff that an unbeaten conference champion is not even vying for a spot to try to compete for a national championship. And it's disgusting. But it's okay. There's going to be a 12-team playoff next year, so they'll get it right next year. Fucking ridiculous. They should have done an emergency 6 or 8-team playoff this year. Fuck it. Give Michigan and Washington a bye week. Then put the true head-to-head of Alabama, Texas against each other. And then just have Florida State and Ohio State play against each other. Who gives a fuck? Do that.
Now, I am curious. Do you think, because if FSU had gotten in, I think it would have definitely been in the 4th spot, probably, based on how this went. Do you think that they would have had a competitive shot against Michigan?
It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference how people think they would have reacted, how they would have played. You didn't see this shit going on with TCU last year, but that's the reason why they probably made a decision. They saw how beat up and destroyed TCU got last year, and they didn't want to repeat it because money talks.
That's exactly where it came from.
And I know Nick Saban's been saving money. He's switched over from the Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies to the Great Value Walmart brand to get some money together to send Venmo to the fucking committee. Paid his way. He's just always doing.
He is a politician. He campaigns like shit to get in there when he goes on to, College Game Day or whatever, ESPN show that they're going to be doing.
He's a spoiled rich kid.
How he hangs out with Marty Smith. Yeah.
That's all it is. It's the spoiled rich kid who's not included. He bitches and moans, and the principal comes and talks to the other kids like, hey, we understand, but you got to invite him. You got to invite him to come on. He's got to go with you. No, fuck you. If you wanted to compete, you shouldn't have lost to Texas.
So I like the point that you brought up about Ohio State a few years ago because of how big the impact of, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago when it happened, when Jordan Travis got hurt, and the impact that we knew that this would have. And that I think that's why it was so especially heartbreaking for FSU fans, is that as fantastic of a season as that school was having, you knew right then when he's getting carted off what that means and what's going to happen from that point on. And Jordan Travis himself brought that up on Twitter, and I think he made a fantastic point, talking about, he said
he wishes that he got his leg broke earlier in the season so that the nation could see what this team was actually about without him.
He tweeted out, devastated, heartbroken, and so much disbelief right now. I wish my leg broke earlier in the season so y'all could see this team is much more than the quarterback. I thought results matter. 13-0 in this roster matches up across any team in those top 4 rankings. I am so sorry. Go Noles. And I feel truly devastated for him. Like I really do feel bad for him because he's going to sit with this forever. Mm-hmm. And what could have been, what he could have done there. But when we bring up Ohio State and what happened, years ago with, relying on Cardale Jones and how it went, JT Barrett, Braxton Miller, like you got the full rotation of quarterbacks in there. Do you believe, because Tate Rodemaker is serviceable, but in that game against Florida that he started, he went 12 of 25 for 134 yards. No touchdowns, no turnovers, though, on that. They still won the game 24-15. He then got hurt, made a valiant effort to try and get back in there and, finish it up for them. But if he had actually lit up the game instead of looking relatively, I won't say pedestrian, but he game managed it. And he did what he needed to do to get that team and that, fantastic defense going. But if he had actually blown up, like let's say he hit like 300 yards, 2 or 3 touchdowns and stuff, do you think that would have been enough?
No.
To get them in? You don't think that
Nope.
would have been convincing enough?
As soon as Jordan Travis went down, their decision was already made.
Yeah.
That's the only justification they needed. Like I said, all you need to do at that time is facilitate. You have a top 5 defense with NFL prospects riddled throughout. All you need to do is be the facilitator point guard type, get it to Keon Coleman, get to Johnny Wilson, hand the ball off to the 3-headed monster in that running back room, and just do what you had to do. It didn't matter how many points they put up. Even last night, if Brock Glenn went in there and just completely went scorched earth over the Louisville Cardinals, it would not have mattered, because the decision alone with having Alabama in there now, it clearly shows me that the decision was made 3 weeks ago, and the last domino that needed to fall was Alabama needed to beat Georgia, which is what happened. As soon as that win happened, there was no other discussion at that point, because nobody thought that Michigan would drop to Iowa. And even that Michigan did drop to Iowa, they're still in the top 4. They probably would have been like the number 3 seed behind Washington and like Texas, but Alabama would have always been 4. And there's another reason why this happens. This is why I feel that the college football rankings, let alone, don't need to start until week 4 or 5. But in my opinion, with this being their final decision, clearly the rankings don't even need to be a thing, because the regular season doesn't matter. It's all about what you've done for me lately, not the whole body of work.
So the final thing I'll ask you in relation to FSU and what happens now. If you're Coach Mike Norvell, what do you do now? Because FSU still has a bowl game. They still have the Orange Bowl against Georgia. The motivation factor, I feel like it's a awful opportunity for morale to die going into this bowl game. Or it could be an opportunity to motivate, to roll in with anger and really beat the living hell out of Georgia in this game and just prove that you should have been in there. But if you're Coach Mike Norvell, how do you get your team to rally up into this? How do you get your team to come out of the disappointment of all of this? Because as pissed and disappointed as you are and other FSU fans, and I think the fans of college football as a whole, outside of, Alabama that got in and Texas and whatever, I think most people are really pissed and disappointed about this, and it's in a range of disbelief that a 13-0 team can't get into the college football playoff. What the fuck are you supposed to do? I imagine that the players on that team are absolutely beside themselves, that they probably still had a hope and belief that they would make it in because they have to in order to play for that. If you're Mike Norvell, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, now that this is just another bowl game, which I hate to say it like that, because the Orange Bowl is usually one of the most exciting games outside of these college football playoff games. It's one of those New Year's Six games, so it's always a really great time. Of course, it's in Coral Gables, which will make it nice. It's in Miami, which will be nice. But I think it really comes down to what the players want. I think everyone knows that Mike Norvell wants to play the game. He wants to be competitive. He wants to light that fire. I mean, if you're gonna call down the thunder, here comes a lightning kind of situation. He wants to light a fire under everyone's ass and go scorched earth across the country. But you got to remember, on both sides of the ball, both for Georgia and for Florida State, I mean, you have a lot of players, seniors and juniors, who are potentially coming out for the NFL draft. They're not going to want to try to risk their body and risk, any kind of crazy injury. And you see that year in and year out. And then even if that does happen and Florida State does come out and they do completely beat the bricks off of Georgia, but say Brock Bowers isn't playing or a couple other key players on defense aren't playing, then you're going to get the whole argument, oh, well, Florida State, they only beat Georgia because they didn't have their full roster going. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I know Mike Norvell is going to get that locker room rallied. I know they're going to do the best thing possible for them, and they're going to have my undying support whether I like it or not at this point. So it is what it is. I know a lot of people are looking to this Georgia-Florida State game and calling this being the actual national championship game because you have one of the top 4 teams in general in Georgia and one of the most deserving teams, if not the most deserving team behind Washington and Florida State. The rest of it can go fuck themselves. I don't care about the Washington-Texas game. I don't care about the Alabama-Michigan game. It's all a money grab. That's all it is.
I can't wait for our live show during the national championship where we're instead watching like Wizards Magic.
Yep. We're going to pivot. We're going to pivot away.